Welcome to my anonymous friend. Now here are your hosts, Tammy Cox and Jennifer McCullum.
Welcome to my anonymous friend. Suzie, Tammy's mom, is here with us today. Tell me about the day that you discovered your husband had contracted AIDS. But before you do, let's go back and give some history.
Yeah, so you were the second born in a family of 10 children. You married your first husband, Matthew, my father, at age 22. You had your first child 1 year later, and your second child, me, 19 months after your first. At age 26, when you were pregnant with your third child, was when you found out that my dad had a secret life. You decided to forgive his unfaithful lifestyle because he committed to changing his ways. And then 4 years after, when he had received some blood work results, you found out that he, my father, was HIV positive.
Oh my gosh.
5.5 years later, in 1993, was when he got sick and died.
That's right.
So, where to begin, Jen? Where do we even begin to dive into this story?
This was in the 1980s when he contracted AIDS, right? Mm-hmm. So that was a big thing. So did you know if he was sleeping with women, how many women? I mean, because the 80s was a big time for a rise for HIV and AIDS.
Correct. So I got married in 1979. I did not figure that my husband was out with anybody at that time. So
You didn't figure, but didn't you tell me earlier that you had found out when you guys were dating that there was some mischievous behavior?
So wait, was she warned? Were you ever warned about this guy? Your dad?
My father.
Your father?
well, I should have figured it out.
But didn't your mother warn you a little bit?
She did, but it was not direct.
Yeah.
Yeah, she kind of hinted around.
Uh-huh.
What would she say?
That she would talk to somebody at the grocery store that had met him before, and he was not the most appropriate.
Now, the grocery store, that's where you met Dad.
Well, not at that grocery store.
Oh, it's another grocery
So
store.
he just liked going to grocery stores?
I think
My
he
dad
liked to
was-
go to grocery stores.
Yeah, that's where he found all his victims.
Okay, so when you say victims, it sounds like he had maybe a sex addiction.
Oh, very much.
Right?
Yes,
Would you?
I would say that describes it perfectly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Of course, that wasn't a term back then. It's a term now we use.
it's a term now, but he
Yeah.
just,
Right.
okay, so you were married to him how long before he contracted HIV?
Well, how I found out is he got caught with somebody, and that husband wanted to contact me. So my husband quickly confessed that there was something going on between him and this was actually an adult babysitter who is married with children.
Yeah, we even have some pictures.
Yes.
We have some pictures with her and her daughter, because wasn't her daughter my age or something?
Possibly. Yeah.
So wait, he was sleeping with her?
With my babysitter.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So when I went to work, that's when this situation would happen.
Yeah, where was I? Was I in
Well,
the
you
crib
were.
or something?
No.
Where was I?
Oh my gosh.
You were somewhere.
I was in my room. I probably witnessed some of this behavior.
Okay, and so you decided to stay with him. You decided to forgive him for cheating and move on. And you thought everything was perfect. You thought he was transforming.
I wouldn't say it was perfect, but you have to remember this is the first that I knew about this. So I was in a state of shock. Mm-hmm. I did tell him, however, that I could forgive him for this at this point, but if he was going to continue, that would be when I'd have to make a sharp decision.
Well, Mom, did you contemplate leaving at this point? Did you contemplate like, hey, could I make it work? Could I take my 3
Yes.
kids? Could I find somewhere? Could I make because I know a lot of people, when they come into these situations, they don't feel like they're in a place to get out of the marriage. They
Correct.
feel like they're financially bound.
Right. So I was pregnant. I was halfway through my pregnancy when I found this out. So I did have to look at that. I had to look at what would life look like if I stayed with him, or what would it look like if I left. And to leave him made me sad. It would mean that my children were not going to be able to live with their dad. Mm-hmm. And that made me sad. However, I wasn't going to be able to live with him continuing this either. So it was a hard choice to make. But over time, I could see that he was deeply grieved by what he did. He saw how it affected me negatively, how it broke my heart. That was the day my heart got broken. So here I am, pregnant, brokenhearted, and I have this big decision to make. And it took some time. And
How much time did it take you, Mom? Like how long?
well,
were you-
it happened
did he
before I delivered, so it had to be maybe 2 months down the road or
And
something.
did you make him like sleep on the couch or anything, or did you climb in bed, or?
I don't know.
I
don't
think I would have
remember.
just been like, hey, why don't you go ahead and take that tent and set it up in the backyard for a little while, like a legit dog house. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying, Ma?
I'm sure there was some sort of separation of sorts that, like what you're saying, but I don't know how long that took.
But at this point, you did not know that he contracted AIDS.
Correct.
So what? 4.5 years later, after you find out about his unfaithfulness, you choose to forgive him. You choose to
Right.
move forward, right?
Right.
4.5 years later,
This
is
just
when,
pops up?
No, well, so he goes in for life insurance policy, right, Mom?
Correct. Uh-huh.
And he gets blood work drawn, and he gets the results back, but he was what? You said he was scared to tell you the results.
Well, what happened was the test results came back, and because it was the early 80s, well, mid 80s, I guess by this time, the doctor's office kept calling saying, we need to see you, you need to come in. They
That's
cannot
scary.
give that information over the phone. So we knew that something was up, and we knew that that was a possibility.
You did know it was a possibility.
Yes, because, AIDS had just come out. It was relatively a new thing, but
So why? That's a big jump to even think in your mind that he could have that.
He had the sexual addiction. So
But
that would be my
still-
first thought. If the doctor wanted to see me, I'd be like, oh, it's probably shown up now.
yeah, being someone that had sexual addictions, of course it's going to be something that we're thinking about. I mean,
Yeah.
what are they looking for in these tests? They're looking for
Isn't
things that might take
down?
your life early. So
Oh, that's what I was going to say. Did you start, before this came out, did he start having any symptoms of anything?
no.
So here you find out that your husband has been unfaithful. Then 4.5 years later, after you chose to forgive him, you find out he has AIDS. I want to know where your head's at when you find this out, and what is your thought process? Is there any plan for you to get out of it at this point, or are you like, I'm fully in this, I'm fully committed to this man, and I'm going to ride this out to the end with him?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Okay. So that 4.5 years before this, I had already committed to stay with him because he had made such significant changes, and he wanted to be with his family. I wanted us to have a family. So I had already made the decision to stay with him and keep the family intact. But when I found out this information, it was the nightmare of my life. It would be the nightmare of anybody's life.
Yeah.
And so there was no thought of leaving at this point. And of course, I didn't leave him. I was holding his hand the day he passed from this
You
life to
loved
the
him
next.
so much.
I did. I was dedicated.
But here's the thing, Mom. It's like, here you were making this decision, right? But then Like I remember asking you years ago when all this news came out, like there was this frenzy about AIDS, right? They were saying things like, oh, you could get it from sitting on the toilet seat or drinking out of the same cup. And here you were with your 3 kids, with this man has HIV. And what were the thoughts in your head? Because a lot of moms for that time period would have been like,
Don't touch the kids.
don't touch this, don't touch that, don't even, like, you know what I'm saying? What was your thought process? Because I know the answer to this, but I want our listeners to listen to your thoughts about how you felt in that position.
Okay, good question. I'm going to say that I'm a woman of faith. And I had already been on the road for a long time at this point. I trusted God more than I trusted the media and what they were saying. So I had to weigh out, like, is this valid or not? Are my kids really in danger? I had to pray and to trust God that He was going to take care of my family. And indeed, He did.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yes.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great story of faith. So you just, when those thoughts would creep in, you'd say, nope, I'm choosing to believe that God is going to protect me and my kids.
That's correct.
Right. And did you do anything preventative when it came to sex?
I didn't. Well, I shouldn't say that.
Yeah.
Yes, there was some changes.
Right.
Right.
Because from what I know now, Dad had definitely contracted AIDS in some point of our being conceived, right? Between
so.
my older sister and my younger brother, at some point, he had contracted AIDS. So you had known at that point that even though he contracted AIDS, you didn't, and your kids didn't. So did you go into getting tested yourself?
Yes. So right after he found out that he had it, then the doctors were calling me in. Well, I was not ready for this. I had just found out the worst news of my life.
Nightmare.
And I stalled to go in because I had to prepare myself. Because I had to look at the fact that if I had it, now my children were going to be orphans at the expense of their father's sin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the interesting part, I remember when we were growing up and we had those friends where the husband got it first and then he gave it to his wife, remember?
Yes.
And we were there when she was dying.
Right.
After he had already died, and we were sitting there with the kids.
Right.
Oh my gosh, that is
And
traumatic.
I remember you telling me, because I think at this point I was like, later teenage years, and I remember thinking, man, we could have been these kids who had lost their dad and are now losing their mom. And that could have been our experience as well.
Yes.
So here you are, reluctant to go in, reluctant to take that test. How long do you think it took you to finally take it?
I probably took it within the week of him finding out.
How was waiting for those results?
Oh,
Did
it
you,
was
you,
hard.
You kids got the test too?
No. They always go to the parents. I just remember taking my son in at this point because the girls were in school. My son was 3.5. I was holding his hand going down to the laboratory where they were going to take my blood test, and he asked, "Why are we here?"
He did at 3.5.
Uh-huh. What are we doing? And I just thought to myself, if you only knew what I was doing. Mm-hmm. It was really hard. So I did stall, but then I went in and my results came out negative. So that
Was it like a rapid test, or did it take time? Or
I don't know. I don't know if it took a week, or I'm not sure.
because what I'm saying, during that time, what were you feeling during that time of waiting for the test? Were you were already going to forgive him and go on, but did you have a plan in place, like if this happens, or you had the faith to just go through it?
I was going to stay. I'm committed. I'm going to stay no matter what. I love who I love, and that's how it goes. Yeah.
I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he was not an easy person to love, Mother.
No, he wasn't.
He was not an easy person to love.
That's true.
But my mom is a very committed woman and a very faithful woman, so she hung around.
And you took care of him when he started showing symptoms and getting sick, didn't you?
Yes, but even that was a short time.
Yeah, he
you
was
know,
only...
because at the end of all this, he was only really sick, I'm going to say, for maybe 5 months. So it wasn't an extended period. It happened to be when the kids were getting ready to go back to school. I mean, it was a very
you had
challenging
like the weight
time.
of the world on your shoulders.
Yeah.
What were you thinking about life moving forward? Because I'm sure when you said my worst fear has come to be, which reminds me of Job, by the way. But when you say that, I want to know where your mind was going. What's the fear? Is the fear losing him? Is the fear of what's the fear exactly? Tell me about it.
I would say, let's see, what was my fear? Beforehand, the fear was just losing him in general.
So the fear was losing him.
Right.
You thought that was like your greatest fear.
Right. And
'Cause
how
I know-
will I go on? So, or how will we go on?
Can you get to the bottom of that fear if you keep following it down? So how will we go on? Keep going.
I just couldn't see past what our life would be like when he was gone.
So meaning, was it the vantage point of like my kids not having a father or me not having a husband, or what's the fear?
Oh, that's another good one to think about. I'm not certain, but most of my fears were about my kids and what their life was going to be like. So
Right. So the fear was about your kids not having a father.
Right.
Yeah.
Feeling the abandonment.
Because
Right.
it's good to know what the actual fear is, right? To have a general fear, let's get to the bottom of what the actual fear is. Is it me not having a spouse, me not having this particular person, my kids not having this particular father? Like, you know what I'm saying?
Right. And I will just add this, that I remember just letting myself, I think it was just one time, look beyond to see what my life could be like after he was gone, if he was going to be gone. And I remember looking at that picture like I could get remarried and have a different life.
Yeah. At what point did you look at that?
I just looked at it briefly one time, probably towards the end, because I could see that this was not going to turn around.
Oh, God.
So I allowed myself to look at it, but then I put it right back in because I didn't want to dwell on that. I had a task to do in the present. So I had to be very present. I wasn't longing to be with somebody else or anything like that.
You're just
No
open.
daydreaming?
No daydreaming. That was not part. Yeah.
So you said-
seriously, I wasn't.
So you said you were at his side the day that he passed and took care of him and everything like
Yes.
that. So when the day was coming, and how did you feel? What were your thoughts when you started realizing, okay, this is probably it? How do you get kids prepared for that? How do you talk to your kids? What is the communication like? What are your feeling? Did you get your church involved? Because, you know, it's funny when we think about it, is we're like, our family's going to be right there when our, you know, something traumatic happens, but it's sometimes not your
That's
family
true.
that's there. So
That's
I just
true.
wanted to ask you.
Oh, well, that's a great question, too. People don't know what to do when people they love are in a situation like that. So we actually, I think it was friends that said, we need to do a meeting here. And this was shortly before he died, because they could see that we needed help. But people don't know what to do. Even family members that loved us dearly just didn't know what to do. So they brought them all together, and just, I think, probably gave practical things to do. And then it started changing, but that was seriously right before he passed away.
Well,
So-
I remember people taking us kids out,
Right.
you know, because at this point, my dad was on the couch 24/7. He couldn't really move, didn't do much.
Yeah,
He
what
went
did you
from-
feel like?
He went from being like this big, full of energy guy to just dwindling into nothing. He lost, how much weight did he lose?
Oh, I don't know, maybe 50 pounds. He was
And
a big
he was
man.
he was a very muscular big guy, and he just kind of was saggy skin, and just like, it's like he aged 100 years, it felt like to me. When I look back in
In just
pictures.
5 months.
In 5 months, he deteriorated like that.
I know obviously there's no cure, there's no medication, but they didn't try to prolong anything like by...
Yeah, they do. He was on drugs at that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
what ultimately took him out was a brain hemorrhage.
Okay.
Yeah, you want to talk about the brain hemorrhage, Mom?
Right. Let me just interject this little piece. AIDS comes in different packages. And what he was suffering from was his organs were turning against him. So his body was fighting the organs. So the organs were starting to shut down. And that form of AIDS is usually quicker and harder because all your systems are breaking down. So that was going on. But what really took his life is when he was up in the middle of the night, looking in the cupboards for pain medication. I put it right next to him on the table next to the bed, but he was delirious and didn't know that or I don't know what that was all about. But anyway, he was in the kitchen scrounging around for pills that were not there, and he fell backwards. And falling backwards, he hit the back of his head. And then a day and a half later, it caught up with him. And it was a bleed because he had low platelets. So that means you could bleed to death internally.
So he was at home for a day and a half, or did he go to the ER?
I remember this very vividly. It was a Saturday night when he fell, because I remember the next morning he didn't get up to go to church. Right. And even though he was very, very sick, he went to church every Sunday. And I remember him showing us the bloody
so he was still
gash on the back of his head.
It was like a strawberry mark or
something. It was bleeding. I remember it. And this was a Sunday, and I remember it was a very weird Sunday. We didn't go to church. But the next morning on the Monday, he was like out of it. I just remember being like, what happened to Dad? He was like weird.
Right.
He wasn't making sense.
Right.
So, I remember when you told us, like, go say goodbye to your dad. He's going to the hospital. It was like he was not the same. It was not my dad. It was like his mind was not all there.
Right.
So you could tell the change.
Right. So it was an immediate downturn for him. And then the ambulance came to pick him up, took him to the hospital. And then we were there for hours. We had lots of people come and visit and stuff. But it wasn't until the evening. So that was about noon that they came and got him. We were there the rest of the day and into the evening. And it wasn't until a certain point that the nurses came out to me and said, your husband's blood pressure is going down. You need to go stand next to him. They had missed this whole thing.
So you had no idea that he was going down?
We didn't know he was dying because they were trying to revive him to go back home. So I'm thinking, okay, they think he's going to go back home. I'm looking at him thinking,
you didn't know when the turn happened, though. You didn't know when it went from, like, because you said he was dehydrated, so they gave him.
Yeah, they hydrated
him
so we could take him home later.
Right.
So I was in that mindset, like, oh, they're trying to make him better, but I'm thinking he doesn't look like he's able to go home. But I'm still thinking, okay, that's what they're trying to do. But then at the very end, it happened really quick, where his blood pressure started going down. And I know the staff was thinking, oh my gosh, we missed this. So they came out to me.
What do you think that they missed, though?
Yeah, that's what I'm
that's what I'm not
They
understanding.
didn't realize how sick he was.
So you think that there was something that they could have done, because the words, they missed something, kind of breeds this idea that
they forgot
should have
that they
done
should.
something that they
I think so. I think they
What
thought.
do you think that they could have done?
I don't know what they could have done. I don't think they just didn't know. I don't hold it against them.
But they didn't know what? We're not understanding what you're
They
saying.
didn't think that he was close to death when he came in. So they were just trying to
But you're making it sound like there was something preventative that they could have done. But you don't actually know that there was anything preventative.
Right. So what they tried to do was get him a brain scan.
Okay. Oh.
To see what's going on, because now they're realizing, this is not what we thought.
So they just thought he might have fell, he might have got hurt or had
Right,
some
and let's just-
confusion,
right.
and they already knew that he was already sick.
Right.
So they already knew that he was sick. So at this point, now they're like, okay, there's something else going on. So they did the brain scan.
You know what? I don't think they actually made it to the brain scan. It was what they were hoping to do.
So they're just guessing along, is what you're saying, to what to do. But the brain scan, they never got to.
You know what? I forgot.
No, that's okay.
So that's fine. So tell us
How long ago was
but
this
right
as well?
after
just
that.
so we know. How long ago was this?
This was 29 years ago.
29 years ago. Okay.
Yeah, so we're talking a long time ago.
So he's right at the end. They tell you, go ahead and stand by your husband. And that's when you realize, oh, he's on his way out.
Correct.
Right.
So it was in minutes. I'm going to say it wasn't even 5 minutes when that blood pressure started going down. His dad happened to be there. So his dad was holding me. I was holding him. I was holding his hand. So it was a special moment. It's a sad moment, but you know what? It's a sacred moment too.
Tell me about that moment. Tell me what you felt.
Well, I got to hang on to him for the rest of his life. I was with him for the rest of the time. I loved him to the end. And that's
I told her to put tissues right here.
We're supposed to have tissues.
This is good though. This is good.
it's wrong. Good.
No, you're gonna use the rug now.
No. Jen always uses the rug to wipe her tears.
So at that point, what was special about that?
Well, when a believer leaves this life, they go right into the hands of God immediately. So he went from my hands to our Father's hands, where he got his complete healing. So that's the beautiful part of this story. He was free from the struggles of his life. He was free from a crippling disease. He was set free. And I was so happy that day for him. Our sadness showed up in a big way, but his happiness, after all those years of suffering emotionally, he was healed and made whole.
So you believed, and you looked at the positive and had faith that this was a new beginning for him.
Oh, it's
That's
so
right.
beautiful.
Oh my
It's so
gosh.
beautiful to
Yes.
watch a person pass from this world to the next.
It
It
is.
is like one of my favorite. I know this is
Was-
going to sound weird, but I think the transition of going from physical to non-physical is the most beautiful experience. I listen to so many people that have the near death experiences, and when they talk about it and they are transitioning, they're like, it feels like coming home.
Did he say
And they
any
don't
of
ever
that?
want it. They don't ever. My dad talked about when he got to go to heaven. He talked about it for I remember solid 2 months. He was telling everyone how excited he was.
So was he able to communicate anything with you?
No. Because at a certain point, he stopped talking.
Oh,
In the process of being at the hospital, friends would come in. He had a lot of dear friends. He was a magnet to people. He loved people, but he was a broken man. And so he would have people, our closest friends and family members came, and he was talking to them, and it was a sweet time. But there got a point where I don't know if he went into a coma maybe, or he just went to sleep. I'm not
A
sure.
coma-like state. Yeah.
Possibly, where he stopped talking. So,
When you say stop talking, that's so weird because most people, they either drift off into sleep or it is I'm thinking about his mom when she was going and when she went off into a coma. Remember, they couldn't
yeah.
give her enough morphine to
Right.
knock her out. And then they finally gave her enough morphine and she fell asleep. And then we waited there for her to go and she would not go.
so after the passing of your husband, how did you tell the kids?
well, my kids were at my sister's house at the time. So I'm trying to remember if
I remember it perfectly.
I came back that night, because I think
came
he
back.
passed about 9:00. So
It was a very weird day. We had no idea what was going on. And when you walked in the house, it was very obvious what had happened because your face was red. You could tell you had been crying.
So how'd you feel when you saw that?
At the age of 11, you don't get a lot of things, but I just knew something super significant had happened. And Dad wasn't with you. I don't know that I could tell.
Yeah.
So what were you feeling at that point, Tam?
I don't think I could talk right now.
Okay. What were you ready to tell your kids?
Well, I had to tell them the sad news, which was going to be really hard. Because he didn't go to the hospital that day because he was dying. He was going there to get better.
Yeah, we had no idea.
So they didn't have any idea. Neither did I in the hospital. I didn't have any idea that that was his last day. That's not what we were thinking. It's not what any of us knew. So now I was going to have to share the hardest news that a parent could share with their kids, that their father would not be coming back.
And that's hard.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine that.
Yeah, and so my youngest was 9, Tammy was 11, and my oldest daughter was almost 13. It was hard for all of them.
It was hard for all of them. Which one do you think took it the hardest, or that you had to really focus on because the way they reacted to it?
Well, my oldest daughter is special needs, and special needs, they react differently than common. So she heard
didn't cry.
it.
Yeah, she didn't
right.
cry
She did
at
not
all.
cry. And she was very close to her dad because she was an early riser in the morning, and so was he. So they had time together that the other two did not have. Plus, she was the oldest, so she had more years with them. So
They just had a connection too. I'll just say that too. They just had a connection that my brother and I didn't have with my dad.
It just really amazes me that you went through all that. You had a child with special needs. You had 3 kids. You had the church. You had everything that you were going through, and you just look at how amazing you are. You're standing here today. Your life is completely different, right?
Yes,
It's
yes.
changed.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. So after he goes, right, after Dad passes, here you are in this state. Now, unlike, I do want to go back and just preface it by saying you didn't tell us kids till about a month before Dad died. So we didn't have a lot to process what was about to happen. Not that we could have wrapped our head around it anyways, because we hadn't experienced death yet. But Dad goes. It's new for us, but it wasn't new for you because you had prepared to bury your husband for years.
Correct. I started the grieving process even though I didn't know that I did. So I could start working through things. But my hope was still that he would never die, that this would not take him. So you have to know till the very end, my hope and prayer was that he would be able to stay with us, that maybe God would heal him or extend his life in some way. So I had that knowledge. But the reason I didn't share it with my kids is, one, they were young, and the way we got treated, because AIDS was still relatively new at that time, is there was a lot of people that couldn't hang with the heaviness of our situation, and they probably thought you could get AIDS different ways too than what's really true. And so we had people exodus our life, and that was really painful for us.
Yeah, I remember you having told me that Dad opened up with you. You weren't the type to open that up, but he would share that with people, and then all of a sudden the friends started going away when they would find out.
Right. So what I wanted to do is protect my kids, because it was all about my kids. You know, they didn't ask for this. You know, so
You didn't either, Mom.
I didn't ask for it either. But you guys, but you guys are
You
kids.
felt like we were
You're
the innocent
kids.
ones in it.
Yes. So it was really me trying to protect you from kids at school that were going to say things and hurt your feelings and talk about you because of what their dad did. And that was me. Yeah. I didn't want you to be hurt any more than you were going to be hurt. So we waited until the sickness became so evident that we had to share so you could start grieving and know that it's not looking good in the future.
Did you know what that was at 11?
I didn't even know what sex was.
Okay.
I was very sheltered. Like I came from a very my dad was especially controlling about what we knew and learned. So I had no idea what sex was.
Okay.
I had no idea any of it. So when they said he's dying, I was like, okay, that's interesting. I thought we all were. Because we are. We're all dying. I know that.
10 out of 10 people die.
Yeah. I know the fatality of man, and I know we don't stay in this avatar all that
But
long.
at 11, that's something.
But
that's
at 11, I didn't have those 3 adult hormones, and that's when I understood, okay, my dad's not coming back. Like I didn't understand the finale of death, physical death.
Man.
So here's the direction I want to take this in, because I want everyone to hear the hope at the end of the journey, and that's that you didn't stay in the grief. The grief passed rather quickly. Yeah. Even though you met Pop, the man my kids call Pop, their beloved grandfather, really their only grandfather that they know. You met him. Actually, you met him before my dad, because he was your high school sweetheart. You guys had broken up.
Gosh.
You guys had broken up. And he found out that dad transitioned, and I know that the way he's spoken about you in the past was like he idealized you as the one that got away. Oh. And when he found out you were available again, he wanted to make sure his opportunity was going to be...
Wait. So how long did you date him in high school? I just have to ask that.
Well, we were first loves. So we were together for 2 years. And then there was, we separated. And we each went on to live our lives. I got married, and then he waited a long time before he got married, but that didn't work out very well.
He wanted you. He was like my one and true and only.
Oh my goodness.
So I mean, he kind of did. Like,
yeah, I mean, sounds
so
like that's awesome.
So when he finds out about my dad's transition, he's like, okay, here's my opportunity. So he made sure that he was the first one knocking on your door.
He was the first one in line. But you have to know that I still had to make sure I didn't have AIDS.
Yeah.
So that was something I had to check off the box. The other thing I thought to myself is, who wants somebody whose husband died of AIDS, who has 3 kids, and one of those kids is special needs?
Severely.
Yeah.
Severely.
What kind of person would want somebody like that?
Somebody's that been waiting since high school to have your heart back.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay, you answered the mystery.
I think that
he
over the
loves you so
years he did question his decision. But the good news is that they're still married. Life is amazing. There's been, there wasn't all the years that led up till now were not great with him and my siblings and I, but through our growing process. And I think that's just because we were all grieving. You were still grieving after Dad died. I feel like you were grieving for years into your marriage, even with Pop. Because the grieving process is not immediate, and sometimes... And it doesn't matter if it overlaps. It's not like you have to go all the way through the grieving process before you start over again. It just means that, there's different components to it. But like we were all grieving, and he came in. So he
came into a hot mess.
A real hot mess.
But God put him there for a reason.
I feel bad for him now. But the good news is that we've pulled through all that, and it's like so good now, and I think it could only be this good if it was so bad then.
Right.
So here we are. And how many years have you been married to Pop now?
27 and a half.
Yeah, 27. And then you went on to have another one.
Right.
With Pop, another child, her 4th child. She was 39.
Almost 39.
Almost 39. Starting over again with another child, and Christopher's now 27. 26. Gosh, I'm way off here. Christopher's now 26. And what is life like now?
Oh, what's it like now? Well, it's peachy. No.
You have 4 kids. How many grandkids?
Well, we have 7 altogether. 2 were bonus kids that came with one of the marriages. So, yeah. Got a grandkids, hoping for some more somewhere.
Some grandkids some more?
Do you?
Yeah. Oh, Christopher. I was just making sure you weren't looking at me because I'm done having the babies.
Oh, are you?
Yeah.
Okay.
She thinks.
She thinks.
I'm calling it now.
Don't. Why would you do
A boy.
that to me? Don't do that to me. I don't want to have a baby past 40. No thanks.
You don't even look it, so why do you
Doesn't
care?
matter. I don't.
You
want
don't
a
feel
baby.
it. You don't look it. You look.
I don't want another baby. Dang it, Jen.
So what I just want to say, I'm jinxing her. So expect one in like 9 months.
Okay.
Get ready, Derek. So I wanted to just say that it was so amazing hearing your story, because I know a lot of people out there have been through some of the things that you've been through, and just how you got through it and how you're still standing, and how your life really did change because you truly believed and took action.
Yes.
And so it's truly inspiring.
Well, and then
thank
think about
you.
it. If how encouraging is it to hear someone with a radical testimony that are living happily ever after?
I
Like
know.
how awesome is that? It's like
beautiful.
It kind of gives for me it gives the story of no matter what you've been through, you have the ability to create a life of complete bliss, and that's all up to you.
Yeah.
So, Mom, aside from like what would be your quote, your life verse, or what's your life verse? What verse do you want to share with our viewers that would wrap your whole life story up with a bow?
Well, there's so many scriptures I could say, but I think the underlying idea is that God is faithful and we can trust him.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
And I know my dad's favorite verse. He who began a good work will be faithful to complete it.
That's
till the end.
Philippians 1:6.
Yeah. So that is beautiful. And thank you so much for being on my podcast. And thank you so much for sharing your story so candidly. And we will see you all next time on My Anonymous Friend.